Catherine Connolly agus Dr. Thomas Pringle.
Got a million markets, 15 minutes and 5 minutes. Thank you. I wish I could say I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate, but welcome doesn't come to my mind. I actually feel nauseated at language being turned on its head. The same language that was used, this is for your good, to put you into these homes, and so on. And I listened to the language carefully tonight. And I have desperately tried, Minister, not to be personal, although I do have a personal connection with the home, which I won't go into, and I also have acted professionally. And indeed, I have been part of the operation of the redress scheme, which made it an offence to disclose, me to disclose as a previous barrister, or for the person to disclose what they got under the redress scheme. I have read all of the reports. I have read the McAleese report. I have read the Ryan report, almost in total, which is very difficult. And 21 years after the Taoiseach apologised, it's time to grow up, us to grow up. It's time to stop talking about the vulnerable women. They weren't vulnerable. They were strong, vivacious women who were made vulnerable by the system, who were demonised by the system. I read one of the reports, which I'll come back to, an interdepartmental report, which is the basis for this commission going back. And it talked about the women hiding away. The women didn't hide away. They were hidden away by a society that would not deal with sexuality, with abuse, with rape, and with many other things. Let me preface my remarks by that and by saying I will do my best not to be emotional, not because it's wrong to be emotional, but because I have the privilege of having a voice. And those that I speak for don't have a voice, and those that died in the mother and baby home, some of which I was related to, whom I was related to, didn't have that privilege. I have that privilege, and I'll do my best to live up to it. So I have looked at all of this with the help of the staff in my office, and I want to pay tribute to them. I want to pay tribute to the library research as well. And I've looked and I thought, what is the purpose of this Act? And I have to say, when I look at that Act and I look at your speech, Minister, which I'm sure you didn't write, and when I look at the briefing, it is a perfect example of obfuscation. It's a perfect example of a system closing in on itself to protect the system, not the people that it's there to serve, and certainly not the survivors. It's not a term I'm comfortable with, survivor, but I use that word because some people are comfortable with it. So I look at this, and you talk about urgency. This is a new version of Grimm's fairy tales. So on the 30th of October, the records are suddenly going to go into a rotten pumpkin or something. Is that right? I don't know. They're going to turn into something that you haven't explained. Breach Smith has already referred to this. Nowhere have you explained to me the urgency of this. Now, this was commissioned prior to my time as a TD, and it was set up, as you well know, in 2015. And people have asked here, some of the TDs, where has the 30th come from? Well, it has come from the 7th interim report, very brief report. It was your duty, Minister, and the departments, the officials in the department's duty, to explain all of this to us so that we could grasp it and understand it and see if we could assist you or to put proper amendments. Now, before I go into it, it is absolutely appalling the pre-legislative scrutiny has been waived. And to come in and say that the business committee did that is nothing short of misleading the Dáil. The government did that with their majority on the business committee. This is one particular piece of legislation where we've been given a golden opportunity to learn from our mistakes, to learn from the fact that the documents from the Ryan administration, the Ryan investigation were locked away. The McAleese documents were given back, and that's already been referred to by Dennis Naughton. And so we look at this tonight, and you say that people have mixed up or confabulated two issues. Yes, they have, and I'll give you that, and I'll come back to why. But you, Minister, have led that, I'm sorry, in your role as Minister. You have led to the misinformation and the confusion. So I look at this then, nobody tonight was able to say where it came from, and I didn't see it in your speech. And the 7th interim report, the 7th time that the Commission of Investigation asked for an adjournment or a revised timetable, and then they were given it until the 30th of October. So they requested it, and the government once again gave it. And I have been particularly hard, I think, on the Commission in terms of delays. Having read all of the documents, I want to say sorry, because they've had to cope with so much documentation, so much delay, and what I would term so much obfuscation on the part of various bodies that wasn't given the material. So let me say sorry to them on that account. So that's the 7th report. The 6th report, you have failed to utterly tell us where it is. Why is that important? Because that's the very one that appears, and I say appear because I don't know, appears to deal with the issues that we're now faced with here with no information. The 6th interim report, this is the press release from your predecessor. She has today confirmed that she received the 6th interim report dated the 14th of February. How ironic is that? 14th of February. From the Commission of Investigation into the Mother and Baby Homes. Although it is a short report, it nevertheless raises complex issues related to the completion of the Commission's programme. Most significantly, because the Commission is required to transfer its records to the Minister and deal with third-party legal costs prior to submitting its final report, the Commission has requested an extension of time, and at that stage it was given till the 26th of June. Can you please tell me tonight why that hasn't been published? Why we haven't seen the issues and the complex issues, most significantly, the transfer of records. Now, isn't that the most minimum piece of information that should be before us if you want to work cross-party and if we're truly here for the good of the people who survived mother and baby homes? The other 5 reports are also very interesting because it shows the lack of bona fides of each and every government since this was commissioned. So if we take the first report, which was fairly basic, looking for an extension of time, but the reasons are interesting and have a direct bearing on what we're talking about now. Again, a very large volume of new information is coming to light. This was in July 16. Now remember, the Commission was set up in February 15, and a year and a half later, a very significant volume of new information is coming to light. And once again, something that really surprises me is the Commission were taken by surprise at the unexpected interest, as if they weren't aware that there was a commission prior with the Redress Commission where 15,000 people came forward. Number 1. Number 2 is more interesting, or equally as interesting. They explain that they need another extension of time. And they raise a number of issues. They note an agreement between the local authority and Galway, or well, not Galway, a local authority and a home, but they don't identify. They talk about vast quantities of information. They talk about the unjust exclusion of unaccompanied babies or children in mother and baby homes from the existing, at the time, redress. They specifically point out to the government that this is wrong. They don't use the word wrong, but it says they can't justify it. To be precise, let me just read a little bit of it. The main issues addressed here are the exclusion of some children's homes from the residential institutions redress scheme, the exclusion of some mother and baby homes from the remit of the Commission. And that specific second one, the Commission, however, considers that it is not logical to include, for example, St. Patrick's and not include the other mother and baby homes. That's in relation to the homes that would exclude it. And then they go on to say, equally, in relation to the children that are excluded, I can't actually find the words, but to paraphrase what they said, there was no logical reason for excluding children who were unaccompanied from the redress because they were in the exact same position as the children that attended the industrial schools. Brought to the government's attention, Minister. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read it, and I feel sorry for you with the volume of works of stuff you have to read. But this was the 16th of September 2016. The government chose to ignore that as well. But again, they're on notice that there's a vast volume. The third interim report is interesting because, again, they asked for an extension of time, and they go into the issues here as well in relation to while there are detailed death records available, there are significant gaps in the information about the burial of babies who died in a number of the institutions under investigation, and they mentioned the word gaps more than once. Then we have this very interesting one, which I won't go into because I haven't time, the 5th interim report, looking for extra time as well, quite justifiably so. They need this extra time to do justice to the vast volumes. Number of quotes. There can be little doubt that most people will find the arrangements made for anatomical studies prior to the 70s distasteful at a minimum. That's where bodies were sold to universities, third-level establishments. Major issues in the cases of burials arise in the cases of Bessborough and Tuam. Private burial grounds not regulated. The most difficult question to answer is why the children were buried in such an inappropriate manner. And in one of those reports, they seek to clarify, because it was said the children and babies were buried in a sewage tank in Tuam, and they see fit to correct that. But they see fit to correct it. That tells us that in 17 of the 20 chambers, extensive human remains were found, and it couldn't be ruled out that they were used as sewage at some stage. And that information and a draft report was sent to the County Council and all to the Bon Secure. On both occasions that the County Council got draft reports and a question to choose not to answer, even though they were the owners of the mother and baby home, and the Bon Secure sisters simply operated it. The Bon Secure sisters' response was to commission their own expert to look at the burial chambers, not in situ, but at the report that had been done by the Commission, so as they could say, well, actually, not proper consideration has been given that these sewage chambers could have been put up as crypts. Can you imagine that? And the Commission come back and say, there's absolutely no way from looking at this that these were burial crypts. So that's the background. Now, why hasn't the 6th report been published? Why have you come in here with a bill when you have the authority under the 2004 Act, 43 or 46? I'll be specific because it's important. That says that there's 43, which is interesting, under the 2004 Act. Subject to the dissolution of commissions. A commission is dissolved on the submission of its final report. Before the dissolution of a commission, the chairperson, or if there are more, shall deposit with the specified minister, that's you in this case, presumably, all evidence received by and all documents created by the Commission. All evidence. No mention of redaction here. All evidence, all documents to go to you, the Minister. That's 43. There are many other ones in relation to privacy, which was copper-fastened in the terms of reference as well. So privacy is looked after in the sense of anonymity. So I've no idea why that's an issue, because specifically the terms of reference provide for it, and so does the grounding legislation. In relation to 43 is the one, the final report. So the final report has now to be given on the 30th of October. And you say you can't ask for that because that's an independent commission and it's up to them to request. I'm not too sure about that. And if that's the case, I'm not sure what interaction you've had with the Independent Commission to be able to come before us and allow an extension now up to February of a commission that's dissolved on the 30th of October, gone, when all the documents become pumpkins, and a commission that's going to stay in being at the same time. Can you imagine how contradictory that sounds, Minister? It's in being and it's not in being. I have no idea why this was necessary except to give documents to TUSLA, which in the briefing when I asked you what preparation had TUSLA made for the reception of these documents, and you said there would be, I think, a regulatory impact assessment to be carried out or some type of assessment. Can you imagine it's not been carried out yet, even though we have all of these years? And prior to that, we had an interdepartmental report. Here, I've read it in detail as well. They highlighted the vast volumes of documentation that were extremely important in relation to having an archive. And finally, you have mentioned absolutely nothing about the protection of information under the GDPR, under the legislation 2018, nor under the directive under which that legislation came in Ireland. And you can't hide away things. Finally, you're right. This piece of legislation, it's not about the 30 years, but you're being disingenuous in saying that, because it's totally based on the 2004 Act and the Archives Act, which is about 30 years. I'd like to go on, but my time is up. Thank you.